We have one more speaker tonight, and her name is Leslie Brown. Leslie Brown has been an activist her whole life, working with community advocacy programs which support women impacted by violence and sexual assault. She's also been working on international development since 2008 on humanitarian and children's rights issues. She has recently become a community organizer with the Edmonds Neighborhood Action Coalition and is outreach team leader for Save the Children Action Coalition Washington. Here to talk about the fight for human rights, would you welcome Leslie Brown, please?
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm losing my voice, so I'm going to go a little slow tonight. Donald Trump's presidency is an assault on women. Let me say that again. Donald Trump's presidency is an assault on women. It's an assault on immigrants. It's an assault on the LGBTQ community. It's an assault on the Muslim community. And it's an assault on anyone who's different, and we're not going to tolerate it. Our nation has just elected a man who has notoriously groped, belittled, and disparaged women. Our fellow Americans chose him over an opportunity to inaugurate our first woman president. I have a photograph to show you here. You probably can't see it very well, but you've probably seen it before. This is a photograph of what patriarchy looks like. Patriarchy is a system of society where the government of men hold power and women are largely excluded. This is a picture of Donald Trump and his male cronies signing into an executive order a reenactment of the global gag rule, which will cost hundreds of thousands of women their lives globally. There's another photograph I'd like to mention, and that's a photograph of Mike Pence and a room full of male legislators discussing the defunding of maternity care under our health care law, with not a single female in the room, like they have any clue about what they're talking about. Nothing quite says powerlessness like the removal of your right to bodily autonomy. And at the behest of a group of people who will never know what that feels like. One of the first things Donald Trump did is he asked the U.S. State Department to report back to him on spending on gender equality programs and the names of people whose primary function is to promote gender issues. And the handwriting was clear on the wall about that. It was not a benign request. They were looking for the family planning money and the LGBT programming and spending. The latest research, and there's quite a lot of it if you're interested in looking into it, states that gender diversity leads to greater innovation, reduced fraud, and improved retention rates across organizations. Each of those things would certainly serve our U.S. economy. In the early 2000s, George W. Bush integrated aspects of gender equality into his foreign policy. However, when you have a leadership cadre with fewer women, not to mention socially conservative men, it's going to be less likely that they will approve legislation or implement policies that support or empower women at home or abroad. And we're leading into a society in which women are discriminated against and less likely to be promoted to positions of power. Trump's budget says it all. He proposes in his, what they call in Washington, D.C., the skinny budget. He's proposing to eliminate $150 million from the WIC program, Women, Infants, and Children, which provides supplemental nutritional benefits for an average of 1.9 million low-income pregnant women and their children. He proposes elimination of block grants that would cut overall funding for discretionary block grants by $8 billion, or 47%. These discretionary block grants currently may serve low-income people and include access to maternal and child health care. He proposes reducing funding for Pell Grants by $3.9 billion. Pell Grants, as you know, provides tuition assistance for low-income individuals, 2/3 of whom are women seeking to better themselves and their families. He wants to provide zero funding for 21st century learning centers, which provide after-school enrichment for 1.6 million children throughout the country. He wants to decrease the Department of Health and Human Services' current funding by 17.9%, which would threaten early education programs like Head Start and Early Head Start that are a vital source for child development for more than 1 million low-income working families. He's calling for a funding cut to health professions and nursing training programs by $403 million. Women make up the largest percentage of nurses across the country. Such a significant reduction could have a serious impact on the training capacity for nurses, the nation's frontline health providers. He also wants to defund the Legal Service Corporation, which is an independent agency that provides legal assistance to poor families in matters like landlord-tenant disputes, domestic violence. And last, he wants to cut $6 billion from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. He wants to eliminate programs like the Community Development Block Grant, which provides housing assistance for low-income individuals, where 75% of households are headed by women. Make no mistake about it, Trump and his administration is completely disastrous for women and girls in this country. And for those of you who maybe don't have children or wonder how this affects you, let me share this. The prospects for little girls in this country growing up with a dearth of female role models in government, fewer opportunities by way of reduced maternity care, less access to reproductive health services, and a growing acceptance of misogyny and sexual harassment in American society. Let me share a little bit more of Mr. Trump's agenda. This is dated April 3rd. Trump pulls back Obama-era protections for women workers. He signed an executive order with little media attention that rolled back hard-fought victories for women in the workplace. Specifically, he revoked the 2014 Fair Pay and Safe Workplaces order that Obama put into place to ensure that companies with federal contracts comply with 14 labor and civil rights laws. One of them has to do with paycheck transparency. So by rolling it back, he's made it possible for federal contractors to not list how they pay their workers. And that is the key to determining whether or not they're paying men and women the same. The other rule that impacts women is that the Fair Pay and Safe Workplaces order included a ban on forced arbitration clauses for sexual harassment, sexual assault, or discrimination. That means if you are sexually harassed in the workplace, if you are sexually assaulted in the workplace, or if you are discriminated against, you are forced to go to arbitration, which means you are rendered voiceless. A good example of the impact of this rollback is our good friend Walmart. Walmart's wage gap works like an inverted pyramid. According to some statistical data in a class action suit against Walmart, women in lower paying hourly jobs make $1,100 less a year than men in the same jobs. And if a woman is in a salaried position, she makes $14,500 less per year than her male counterparts. And I'm a big believer in determining your priorities by how you spend the money. So I would like you to remember this the next time you walk in the door to Walmart. For a minute on Mr. Trump's Supreme Court pick. Mr. Gorsuch has a judicial record that reveals an imminent threat to women's rights, as we all know, and the continued fight for equality in several ways. I couldn't help but laugh out loud at his comment at his confirmation hearing that he would have gotten up and walked out of the room if somebody had asked him if he was going to overturn Roe. Apparently he thinks we all just fell off the turnip truck. Judge Gorsuch's judicial record already suggests a disregard for women's right to access health care. He dissented and argued that the court should have allowed Utah to strip federal funding from Planned Parenthood. And then, of course, in a more famous case, the Hobby Lobby versus Sebelius case about religious freedom, he ruled in favor of protecting the religious preferences of employers and allowed a for-profit corporation to refuse to comply with the Affordable Care Act, which mandates the coverage of contraception through health insurance. So remember that the next time you walk through the door of Hobby Lobby. Most recently, and this was just a few days ago, Mr. Trump signed an order that allows the states to cut Planned Parenthood funding. Okay, and this was a provision that Obama put into place. So once again, he is undercutting the progress that we've made. And just in conclusion, if I can find it. One of the biggest concerns I have is that Trump and his administration are demonstrating a lack of interest or any recognition that women's issues are important. And because of this, I fear that the religious right, led by Pence and Bannon, will fill that vacuum and push towards policies that play to their base. As long as you live, you will never see a photograph of 7 women signing legislation that defines and controls what men can do with their reproductive organs. It is unimaginable. But I will say this to you. The anger and the frustration that you feel today is a reflection of the goodness that is in your heart. The fact that you reject sexism and bigotry and intolerance and hate, and you embrace inclusivity, integrity, and empathy. We are not going back. We must be united, and we must fight every step of the way. Thank you.